Assalamu alaikum. I am with Pakistan's National Security Advisor, Dr. Moeed Yusuf. The interesting thing is this, that I share a first name with him and I know him for almost 20 years. But ever since he became Pakistan's NSA from a think tanker, this is the first formal, detailed interview discussion I'm having with him. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Yusuf.
Thank you. It's not because I'm not accessible. You've been hiding.
No, we have been doing small chit-chat on television.
Happy to speak.
But not, I wanted to sit down for a very detailed discussion. And my first question is this. I have known you as an editor, as a columnist, then as a think tanker who was in Washington. And you looking at a world to analyze the world, to make a comment on it. Now you are in a position to defend the only nuclear Muslim country's positions in the world. How has this transition affected you and changed your worldview?
First of all, I have many more gray hair than I used to. But look, I mean, on a serious note, I think there can be no greater honor and privilege for somebody at my age, who's frankly a nobody at the end of the day, to be given this opportunity. So Allah is great, and I'm actually very blessed to have colleagues and a boss who's actually very understanding. We have space to do things in a different way. If you get somebody like me, the last thing you want is to straitjacket the person to say, do as the system does, right? The whole idea is change, think differently, because that's my background. Analysis, long-term strategic thinking, which frankly has been a weakness for us. So in that sense, I mean, you know, one can't be grateful enough. But in terms of the substance, I mean, honestly, I think my biggest lesson is that we have a much better story to tell of who we are, what we've done for ourselves and the world than we were able to. When I used to sit in Washington, I mean, you know Washington well, criticism after criticism about what Pakistan has done wrong, why Pakistan is a security state, and you know, I sat there for 10 years and kept listening to many people saying, oh, this guy is pro-Pakistan, this ISI, whatever. I mean, these things continue and you learn to ignore them. What one realizes when once you get into the system is that we have a story to tell. We need to do better at telling that story. At the same time, like any other country, we have weaknesses where we must introspect and fix the problem. And I think too much of our time went into trying to sell a story in a way that the world was not absorbing.
Why?
Well, I mean, I think partly because...
What is a weakness?
I think partly, you know, every country has this issue. You tend to think of others in your own image. So if I speak to you in Pakistan and explain something, you would imagine that the other person of another country would also do the same. I think we were still in a public relations mode rather than a strategic communications mode. We hadn't really sort of made that transition. It's still, of course, a work in progress. But also, I think in Pakistan's case, for the last 20 years, the strategic interests of the US and Pakistan were not always 100% aligned. Or at least the US didn't think so and Pakistan didn't think so. And I think that disconnect also played on this. But at the end of the day, this is a country that has suffered because of the wars next door. It has still supported the US. It has worked very closely with our primary partner and strategic partner, China. And this is a country that actually has achieved a lot, not only for itself, but for the world. I mean, that conversation had not happened in the way, it's still not happening as much, but I think we're moving in that direction. The other thing you realize, Moeed, is that we have tremendous capacity, which hasn't been harnessed in a way that the modern world can be attracted to it, right? You know, I'd heard...
Could it be one of the reasons is this, that we are pitched against, in terms of narrative, we pitched against Indian Union, which is for bigger, which has a much larger intelligentsia.
Look, I've seen this, right? I mean,
which is more integrated with the English-speaking world.
Absolutely.
If you were actually selling a narrative against Iran, Afghanistan, or some other country, we would probably not be seen in such a weak position.
I think
India is very well entrenched into international...
you're right. I think you're right. And there are two ways to look at this. First of all, is India entrenched? Yes. Do they lobby against Pakistan? Absolutely. I mean, I've seen this myself for years and years, right? But then there's the other side. Me sitting in my position, my job is not to be cribbing. It doesn't help anybody. even though what you're saying is correct, and we must keep highlighting that when it's done in a wrongful way, the EU Disinfo Lab is a great example of a rogue state trying to undermine another country. But equally, I have to focus on what we need to do better. Why isn't Pakistan's ability to have that kind of conversation with the West there? What did we do wrong? What do we need to do more? Right? That conversation is also as important, and that's my job. So we've been working on that as well, making sure that the rightful conversation about Pakistan happens in that part of the world.
No, you're someone who spent more than 10 years in Washington and not in a bank or in a bakery, but basically inside the think tank community, interacting with State Department, Pentagon, security institutions. What is the sticking point in people in Pakistan feel that we have helped United States? I mean, United States asked for helping with a negotiated settlement with Taliban. United States got a very honorable withdrawal from Afghanistan. They were not attacked. They were very safe. In fact, when an ISIS attacked Kabul airport, Afghan Taliban were actually securing the American withdrawal or the perimeter. Then their forces were evacuated by Pakistan. International diplomats evacuated Pakistan. What are we expecting out of us?
I think for the past 20 years, there was an unwinnable war that some wanted Pakistan to win for them. It was simply an unrealistic goal. Pakistan also made mistakes. The forward-leaning kind of policy that said, take bases, sit here, do whatever you want, I think created a very bad or negative impression in terms of where Pakistan would draw the line. I think one of the challenges this government has and this Prime Minister has is that he set a new paradigm. Pakistan is never going to be up for sale. Pakistan is going to stand for what its interests are, not emotively, but very pragmatically, right? So a lot of people have talked about, oh, you've said absolutely not, it's a mistake. But it's the truth. There are no bases that are going to happen. The one change that I used to crave for, and I think has happened, is we say what we do and we do what we say. This has been a disconnect.
Is not prepared to talk to this Prime Minister.
Wait, look, I think Pakistan and Pakistanis, as Pakistanis, we really need to think through what we want from the world. Do I want a call to my Prime Minister? That's not the issue here. The issue is we need to be what a self-respecting nation is. We have told the world we want to work with the world. We are not in any camp. Despite our relationship with China, we want very good relations with the US. Right? I met my counterpart, the foreign ministers met his counterpart, the army chief has talked to his counterpart, etc. Why? Because we want a good relationship. Right? What are the contours of the relationship? It can't be from an Afghan lens, it can't be from an India lens, it can't be from a China lens. It has to be a bilateral relationship, a give and take as equals on where the mutual interest lies. Now, that has to be worked out. If there is a condition which Pakistan does not feel is in its interest, we won't go there. If that creates a challenge in terms of moving forward, we've got to work through that. In the past, it has happened that there have been decisions taken without the public on board and is backfired. This is a paradigm that this Prime Minister, not with the US, with everybody, is set this paradigm.
You twice met the US NSA, your counterpart, one in Geneva and then second time in July. Is there any progress?
When we met in Geneva, we agreed on a blueprint. In fact, there was a lot of critique here, oh, Pakistan took a blueprint. Absolutely, we took a blueprint. Because in the past, we used to go and meet countries in generics. We want a good relationship, we want to move forward, no action plan, we don't know where we're going to go from here, how are we going to move forward. So yes, we had a blueprint. How are we going to move forward on commerce? How are we going to move forward on investment? How on climate? How on health, etc. Broad-based structured dialogue, right? We agreed, and then we agreed that 2 months later we will look at the progress and recalibrate as needed. That was July. We met in Washington. So that process is ongoing. What has happened though is that Afghanistan has sucked out a lot of the energy from every room where a conversation was happening, because the last 2 months, I mean, have gone into managing what has happened in Afghanistan. That process is ongoing. We just had
what happened in Afghanistan, was it unexpected from Washington?
I think for everybody. I don't think
in what respect? They were withdrawing. They knew the
pace
Afghan
with
government
which-
cannot fight for very long.
Well, no, I think nobody expected that the Afghan security forces would just put their hands up and it'll be the end of it. In 12 days or 14 days, the entire country would be captured by the Taliban. I think that was a surprise for everybody, perhaps even for the Taliban, I don't know. But it shows how fictitious the entire narrative, it came down like a house of cards. Why? Because Moeed, for 20 years, Pakistan kept saying this. And we were actually looked upon as insincere when we said, you can't win this militarily. Afghanistan has a context, it has a history. Talk to the Taliban, include them, not because we are pro-Taliban or whatever, because that was the only way to solve this problem. Now, what happened? A narrative was created by the Ghani government, by the Karzai government, by the Western governments, and fueled and funded and sponsored by none other than India. The EU Disinfo Lab is a very good example of what? But for Pakistan, everything would be okay. Why was that narrative created? Because if a narrative, true narrative of the internal problems was created, if the Western taxpayer was genuinely explained as to what the ANSF is going to be able to do or not, what the level of corruption is, where the money is going, what would have happened? They would have asked questions of their governments to say, why are you putting in $2 trillion?
The questions which they're asking right now.
But it would have saved the Western world this embarrassment that they've gone through. They bought India and Kabul's narrative lock, stock and barrel, and this is what they've gotten for it. We kept saying...
ago you said that we are not waiting for a call and we have to look at as to what our priorities are. But in the first week of August, after your US trip, you showed a lot of exasperation by saying that if Biden doesn't call Pakistani Prime Minister, we have other options. What you exactly meant by that?
First of all, I don't understand sometimes your industry, my friend. Could somebody at least go and check what was said? Even what
headline.
Even what that article was saying. Just read below the headline.
We have other options.
They've created a sensation around a headline. There are programs on TV taking place saying, oh my God, he said this. Nobody read the article where she clarifies herself that that's not what was said. But anyways, forget that. Let me make this clear. A call is essentially optics.
Right.
We are talking about substance of a very important relationship. Right? So, would I crib? No. Would anybody crib? Is the Prime Minister waiting for a call? No. Absolutely not. But there is something else I did say. We are not in the old mold.
What was the old mold?
I'm going to tell you. Where the US can divide and rule Pakistan's house, talk to one official to get one thing done, then talk to another official to get another thing done, see where the path of least resistance is, use the civil-military disconnect that used to happen, and get what you need. Why is the world so frustrated sometimes with Pakistan's position overall? Or frustrated, or maybe, talking about they want things to be done a different way? Because there is no civil-military disconnect anymore.
Right.
There's a coordinated effort. When I went to Washington, who was with me? What better example of coordination?
No, but the argument was this, that you were only having a picnic and the intelligence head was actually having the real meetings.
Correct. So this is the old mold that people want to think about. And what I can tell you, Moeed, I've said this in public and I'll say it again. 150% support from the military, from the ISI, from the Prime Minister. If this office fails, it's my fault. So we went. Why? Because there were conversations that straddled both. We sat and talked to them. This is how mature governments work. Now, if anybody thinks that they can come to me and ask me, we need this, and then go to another official, and not happening, because there's one decision maker, right? So what I will say to you again, absolutely, is Pakistan has one boss. Simple as that. If things have to happen methodically, then we have one shop where the buck stops. That's where the decisions are made. That individual is not into optics. I can tell you right now.
There might actually be some other kind of strategic problems. There is also a so-called track 1.5 dialogue taking place with some retired army officers and retired foreign secretaries. And someone who's familiar with that track 1.5 told me that the American side insists that Pakistan has to move away from China, has to move away from CPEC and Belt Road Initiative.
Look, Pakistan's made it very clear. You've heard me say this a million times, a geo-economic pivot. A lot of people talk about it and ask what is it, right? And we've explained it. Islamabad security dialogue happened, etc. But let me say this one more time. Pakistan is saying our most prized asset is the location. It's been used geostrategically. It will continue to be used geostrategically, but we are going to have a much more concerted focus on geoeconomics. How? By creating connectivity through our territory, by asking the world to partner with us rather than only provide assistance in terms of development and investment, and to work on peace in the region as far as possible, because unless that is there, we can't create connectivity and investors and other things won't happen. Now people tell me, but this is unrealistic. Look at what is happening on your western border. Look at the relationship with the eastern neighbor. I accept it. But when countries make major pivots and transformations, you don't consider this to be reality in a year or 2 years. Could be 5 years. It is showing you the intent of the government and the country of where we want to go. Now, China is a key pillar of that vision, because our north-south connectivity comes through the China-Pakistan economic corridor, right? China is a strategic partner. Does that mean that we want to partner with China not with anybody else or at anybody's expense? No. We want a very good relationship with the US. We want China and US to co-invest in Pakistan. We want Russia to come and invest in Pakistan. So
but that's not happening. No US firm has taken any interest in investing.
Actually, that's not true. US still remains our largest export destination. One of the greatest number in terms of volume of investment comes from the US still, including remittances.
But not in CPEC.
No, not in CPEC. But I'm saying the US can come and invest in, when we talked to the Americans this time, we offered them, come and invest in a reprocessing zone. It's not tailored to any particular
country. So what
country.
is the response?
The response is yes. We need to work through that and see what kind of arrangements can be made, what companies would want to come here. Because remember...
So they're not conveying to you that you need to move away from China?
Look, at this point, Pakistan's view is very clear. We are in no camp. We are moving forward with everybody. I haven't heard that they've come and said either us or China. It'll be a crazy thing for them to say, because Pakistan's relationship with China is non-negotiable. But we can also help the US and others in a lot of ways in the region, and of course benefit from their investment and support.
Dr. Yusuf, if you look at some of the key Pakistani English publications, major publications, you get the impression that CPEC is on a freeze for the past 2.5 years, and ever since the Imran Khan government has come, CPEC is not progressing. I mean, for instance, the delayed 10th JCC, China's refusal to invest into ML1, and all these. What is the picture?
First of all, if it was on a freeze, the PM wouldn't be in Gwadar 2 months ago, wouldn't be visiting these sites. The reality of this is we are investing $60 billion plus in the economy. There are always going to be periods which are slow and which are fast. There are capacity issues. There are sequencing issues. You remember, we are the same system that has handled much less money with difficulty before. So there are always going to be these ups and downs in pace, not in terms of the relationship, right? But for anybody to think we're going to slow down on what is our flagship project for connectivity, for the geoeconomic vision, for the partnership, is completely made up. What is also made up is, oh, Gwadar is a strategic port, Gwadar is going to have this, it's going to have a base. It's an economic port. We are trying to create transshipment facilities. It's still in the infancy. Yes, there is a US-China competition which is getting colored by everything that is happening around, and we are getting questioned again and again by the likes of you on where do we stand. We stand with a partnership with China that is non-negotiable, with an excellent relationship that we want to have with the US and continue building, with an excellent relationship with Russia, with the only country that can talk to all Muslim countries in a friendly manner. That's what we see ourselves. We are now the melting pot of all positive global economic interests. That's the essence of our geoeconomic vision.
The last Chinese principal visit to Pakistan took place in 2015, Xi Jinping. Then it was expected will take place in 2019, 20.
Fortunately, COVID. So, I mean, this last year and a half, the Chinese have been very cautious about COVID. I mean, if you look at their rules and whatever, COVID has delayed this, a prime minister's visit there. And I think as soon as things open up, inshallah, we'll see more activity.
In terms of geoeconomics, you mentioned both East and West. Now, recently there was the Dushanbe summit of SCO. I think you were there yourself, right? What is the spirit of Dushanbe? There was much similarity between Prime Minister Imran Khan and President Putin's speech, which everybody noted. So what is the spirit?
The one basic change that Pakistan has made in thinking through this geoeconomics is Central Asia was ignored. We hadn't done enough work on Central Asia, in my view, in the past. Now we've opened up in a big way. Agreements with Uzbekistan, which is sort of the front runner, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, virtually every Central Asian country we're connecting. Russia with the gas stream pipeline, we're opening up. Why? Because they are desperate for the shortest route to the sea. We want energy, we want connectivity, and for once I think the one positive thing that we may get out of this change in Afghanistan, inshallah, is a corridor of connectivity, which Ashraf Ghani's government had deliberately stalled because they didn't want Pakistan to benefit. Now with peace and stability, inshallah, holding in Afghanistan as things move forward, we want that so that Central Asia and Pakistan can be connected. So that it's very positive. In fact, there is interest in moving much faster than we are able to.
Now, coming to the east, if you move to the east, most economic analysts are convinced that unless Pakistan trades with India, the great majority of Pakistani population lives next to India. So a bilateral trade with India can really help them. This government also took a halfway measure of normalizing the trade or opening some initiative with the trade. Now, the Indian diplomats and the Indian media and think tanks say the Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan has taken a very hard and rigid position on Kashmir, August 5th Indian decisions and Article 370. Article 370 is not going to come back. August 5th cannot be undone, and Pakistani Prime Minister is unable to understand that position.
If Pakistan has a legal right to stand up for people who have a right to self-determination, and if another country who was already killing them, brutally massacring them, torturing them, does something on the 5th of August 2019 which reinforces that process, any self-respecting nation or leader would stand up for the people that it has stood up for 70 years and will continue to stand up for. I know what the world wants. I know the world doesn't want to hear about this. I hear every single day human rights situation in Afghanistan. I've yet to hear anybody come and talk about Kashmir. Are they not human? And mind you, I am not talking of anybody else's territory. It's not my business what happens anywhere else in the world. I can counsel, I can nudge, I can talk about it, I can champion a cause. These are people who want to be with Pakistan. That's their right to have a right to self-determination. These are our people who've been subjugated to illegal oppression for the past 7 decades. Who would not stand up for them?
But when we
why would you not stand up for them? For a parochial interest? To make somebody happy? To look good? That's not the
makes perfect sense. But
we have.
When you mention the geoeconomics and India being an important pillar of the geoeconomics, how then we do move? How do we move forward?
Now that's a fair question. It's an impediment. You can read my writing for the past 15 years. I've written again and again that the eastward connectivity needs to open up because it will benefit Pakistan and India and everybody else. And this is the view that I came with in this office. I have to tell you, Moeed, you can look at what I've been saying and how there's not a single thing I've said because I sit in this office. Every single thing I've said is informed by my opinion on what is good for Pakistan. That's the oath I've taken. And let me tell you something very depressing. The one country, one area, one relationship where my view has changed completely is India. India
so this
today,
is the beginning of my question. How has your worldview changed when you had a different set of information after becoming the NSA?
Well, overall the worldview hasn't changed, but what has changed is that I'm much more empowered with real information that I cannot understand why Pakistan was not able to market better and tell the world it's part of the story, as I've told you. But on India, I can't speak to the India prior to me being in office. I don't have access to that information. What I can tell you is, no, and I've, as you know, in my scholarly life read a lot, no ruler of any major country has been closer to Hitler's worldview than Narendra Modi. I say this very advisedly. I am depressed because it does create an impediment for my geoeconomic vision. I am depressed because every day, not only Muslims, but what is happening with Indian minorities, the world is looking and writing about it, not me. I am depressed because I see no possibility of this ideology changing. It's going to get worse. And frankly, I, as a human being, am depressed for the hundreds of millions of Indians who don't believe in what is happening and what their government is doing. Mark my words, this is a government that has picked up a conflict with every neighbor. This is a government that will destabilize the region. This is a government that knows no end when it comes to implementing its ideology. Having said all of this, I remain under instructions from my Prime Minister to see if Pakistan's national interest, national security interest can be defended while moving forward with India. If they take one step, we will take two. I remain on that. Any opportunity, we are willing. Unfortunately, having been there, tested and tried that, the world needs to open their eyes to an India that is becoming a global threat.
But is the world opening its eyes
No.
to this threat?
No, and it didn't to Hitler till it was too late.
Now, the problem is, a huge challenge is that Indians don't like our assessment of Narendra Modi, which looks very objective from the Pakistani lens, is academic as well, but irritates them a lot. They said he's a popularly elected Indian Prime Minister, he's very popular. Us describing...
Sure, it's their country. I have nothing to do with that. All I'm saying is, I'm not saying how India should be run. I am saying when India's behavior affects my national security, it is my right to raise my voice. When India's behavior affects my people in an illegally occupied territory, it is my right to raise my voice. Am I winning today? Maybe not.
In whatever interaction you have with Indian intelligentsia, think tanks, government and diplomats, do you find any objective evidence of them realizing that India has undergone a massive political transformation internally and it has moved in a huge way to the right of its political
I find
spectrum?
Indians scared of speaking. I find, having spoken to Indians on the record, they defending to the T whatever the position is, and immediately after going off air saying, we are in misery, we can't say it, we've got to protect ourselves. That's the reality of today's India. I'm nobody to speak to it. I'm not interfering in their internal affairs. Good luck to them to do whatever. I have the right to tell you when it affects my country and our national security. That's what we are doing to the world. We put out dossiers. You were saying before we started.
You know, I saw a news item in an Indian publication, Sunday Guardian or something, I think that was founded by M.J. Akbar, in which there was a piece on 17th or 18th September that says that Dr. Moeed Yusuf is running a disinformation propaganda campaign against India, and he and websites and other publications are attacking India and trying to tell the world that India is not a democracy anymore, which is a huge threat to India. That's a published thing.
Dr. Moeed Yusuf wasn't trained in propaganda. We use data, we use research, and then we formulate our opinion. But yes, where they are right is Pakistan is speaking up and speaking out. For whatever reason, Pakistan did not do this as it should have, in my view, in the past few years. I'm not pointing a finger at anybody. Yes, we are telling the world through dossiers. Yes, we are telling the world by putting out objective data on what India is doing. Why? Because it's affecting me, right? They don't like it. I'm sure they don't like it. What do they want? A subservient Pakistan that just continues to play ball and pretends that nothing is wrong. I can't do that. Yes, this office is putting out information. I want to be challenged on any piece of it. This country called Pakistan is putting out information. The dossier was put out, Moeed. 2 dossiers. One on terrorism, one on...
one in December 2020.
I think October maybe.
October.
And one, or maybe December. And
November
one,
or December.
And one recently on Kashmir. Correct?
131 pages dossier.
Correct?
With names, dates,
We have
and
asked
details.
everybody we gave the dossiers to. Any factual error you find, come and talk to us and tell us.
Have you got any?
Zero.
No.
Okay? It is out there in the world. Tell the Indians to come publicly and say, here is what is wrong. What are they waiting for?
So they haven't really challenged the contents of that 131
They
pages.
can't,
Here.
my friend, because the sources are not Pakistani. It's as simple as that. Which country goes to the extent of putting audio, video, sources in dossiers? Which country, which intelligence agency? Nobody does this. Why did we do it? We're 200% sure of our information. And again, my job is not to malign India. I don't have time for that. This country has better things to do. But I will tell the world when India destabilizes the region or tries to destabilize me. When 66 terror camps operate in Afghanistan against me and 20 odd in India. When Chinese nationals are attacked to undermine CPEC. This is the irony. None other than the Indian Prime Minister set up a cell in his office, put 500 million, we told the world in the dossier to undermine CPEC.
Yes.
Let me also tell you something very sad. I sit here, the office is responsible for long-term strategic thinking, for planning, Afghanistan, US, internal security, advising the Prime Minister. Please go and do an investigative piece on what my counterpart's job, or a large part of my counterpart's job has been when it comes to Pakistan. I read somewhere publicly that, and I can't vouch for the news, but it was in public eye, that the Indian National Security Advisor's Office's budget has gone up from 33 crores to 333 crores.
330 crores Indian.
So go and
makes
check.
It more than 600 Pakistani crores.
Go and check, right? What is happening if that is true? Look,
but have you interacted with your Indian NSA counterpart?
Look, again, I've publicly said that I haven't. The point is,
you have never met him.
I have met him, but I've not interacted with him in the bilateral dialogue that was put out. It is very unfair when Pakistani media starts believing Indian stories to cast blame on the Pakistani government, right? If, let's say, I was interacting with him in quiet talks, I was doing it on behalf of my state. What's there to hide? I would have told you. But since that hasn't happened, there's no point just continuing to push this. There were conversations with India in the beginning of this year. Everybody knows this. We've made it public. Those conversations were to see if India is willing to do right by Kashmiris, to move forward one step so we can take two. The answer is they're moving in the opposite direction. So thank you very much.
But there has been a structural problem where the Indian media and the establishment have developed the capacity to define Pakistan. Is your office thinking strategically on this problem? They tell the world what Pakistan is. Pakistan has not been able to define itself for the past 20, 30, 40 years. The Indian academia, intelligentsia, the media, the think tanks have defined Pakistan.
Yeah, one part of
through
this,
their penetration into universities like Columbia, Oxford,
one part
Cambridge.
of this, yes, and the other part, no. I don't spend any time thinking about how to create false and fake narratives that they have created. That's not my job. Nobody in Pakistan does that. Yes, where I do think, how do we make sure that we present our story better, right? Why is it that every second book you pick up on Pakistan is written by a non-Pakistani? Why aren't we writing? Who has stopped us from going and engaging with think tanks and with universities or on Capitol Hill or the British Parliament or having our scholars? Who's stopping us? Right? Pakistan has academic chairs in multiple universities.
But many of them are lying vacant.
So whose fault is it? Pakistan, us. So look, I told you in the beginning, there are things that the enemy does and we must call them out and react as a mature state would, but we must also make sure that if we have weaknesses, we overcome them.
Despite these challenges, there has been a ceasefire on the line of control at the beginning of this year, and there was in fact a trade initiative that got stalled. So it looked as if your government was moving in bits and pieces to normalize relations with India.
Yeah, but what is coming from the other side, no rational actor can move in that direction. I've told you, we want to move forward. It's part of our geoeconomic vision. It's part of civilized neighborly relations. Everybody benefits if this region gets integrated, but it will not be at the cost of national security. The same person who's talking to you about geoeconomics is telling you, absolutely, we cannot till we know that it is happening in a rational way, where they do right by the Kashmiris and our interests are protected.
Coming back to Afghanistan, we have been hearing for the past 2 months plus that Afghan Taliban since July have been asserting that Pakistan should have some sort of accommodation for the TTP and the TTP should come back on a political settlement. Now in a TRT interview, the Prime Minister of Pakistan has admitted that we are in talks with TTP. What are we really talking about them? I mean, because we have several examples in the history of failed peace talks.
What I want to say is that everybody should be comforted that there is no underhand deal that's going to be made
Right.
without public buy-in. There is not going to be any question of Pakistan giving up on its principles, on its law, on its constitution. But yes, if another group has realized, for whatever reason, that what they did is absolutely wrong and they are willing to remain law-abiding citizens and go through the course of law, then we want to understand what's in their mind. We don't want every Pakistani killed through a barrel of the gun. Why? Right? So yes, in that formula, in that format, absolutely there should be a conversation to figure out what they want. If we find out that they are willing to do what the state of Pakistan must require them to do, maybe there is a way
But
forward.
the critics of this policy believe that the TTP should have sued and asked for peace. They should have surrendered and then Pakistan should have considered, rather than Pakistan actually opening talks with them.
Well, I'm not sure you can say Pakistan opened or they opened. The conversation is basically the Afghan Taliban have come into power. India used to use NDS and work with them to attack. We made it clear to the Afghan Taliban this is unacceptable. They said, okay, because they are on our territory, we will see what can be done, but we assure you this will not happen. They came back and said, maybe they want to do exactly what you're asking them to do, and the chapter can be closed in a way that the Pakistani state wants. So we want to find out if that's true or not. Nobody should get their expectations high to say that this is going to end up tomorrow in a way that somebody wants. What I can assure you is there will be no secret dealing in a way that the public is left out of what is happening. And if there is critique on what is happening, that critique is welcome, because this is a process.
One or two more questions. You, Pakistani Prime Minister, and several other key functionaries of the Pakistani state have been requesting, exhorting, asking the world to engage the Afghan Taliban for the past several days and weeks. What has been the response so far?
First, Moeed, I think is a good question. I want to clarify something. Because sometimes there's a criticism, oh, you seem like spokesperson for the Taliban. Let me just clarify what we are doing. We are looking at Pakistan's national security. We have been bitten for the past 40 years with this problem of the war next door. We know that if there is a collapse in Afghanistan, there will be a serious problem on our borders, and perhaps terrorism will flourish more in the neighborhood. No Pakistani official can want that for his or her country. Correct? What are we telling the world? Don't let it collapse. Because if you let it collapse, we will hurt. So we have a right to say this, but you will also hurt. How? Mass migration. Last time it ended up in transnational terrorism. Right? If transnational terrorist groups are there, they're going to try and target everybody they can. This is the lesson for the past 40 years. Lawlessness will breed terrorism. So now the question comes, how do you avoid that? You avoid that from our point of view by engaging with the Taliban, making sure they get the assistance capacity wise and monetary to run the country, and use that leverage to hold them to their promises. What are their promises? Exactly what the world wants: inclusive, rights for all, no terrorism from Afghan soil. What is Pakistan's position? Exactly that. Right? What we can't afford as Pakistan is wait for the world to decide what they want to do. We will need to engage. We're not talking of recognition, separate conversation. We need to engage because we have a border, 2,600 kilometer border. The same world comes to us and says, please help us evacuate thousands of people. And the same world says, please don't engage. I mean, how is this possible? Right? So the world needs to think through this for their own sake. Pakistan's position is in self-interest. We will continue.
But the world is not only the Western countries. The world also consists of China, Central Asian republics, Iran, Turkey, Middle East, and Russia. What has been the response from there? No one is moving forward to recognize Taliban. I haven't seen any economic aid flowing from anywhere.
Look, humanitarian assistance, I think there's a fair bit of consensus now needs to flow. It's about the mechanics of how it flows, because the controls and the system is not as operative. There are banking channels, this and that. The development aid, yes, I mean, there are these questions. Some say wait and see. I think overall we've led a very successful effort to bring the region together. You've seen the foreign minister touring various countries. Our intelligence chiefs were here some time back. I think overall everybody agrees. Collapse is not an option, and we need to engage. Now the question is engage how, on what terms, and how quickly. right? That's the conversation that needs to be had again and again, and very quickly move in that direction, because we don't have time. We can't wait for 6 months and 2 years to figure this out. So we are trying whatever we can, not on behalf of Afghan government, on behalf of Pakistan, because it hurts us if things go wrong. And ultimately also, please understand, the world is also, there's some hypocrisy here. We want to take out every Afghan who can run the country in terms of capacity. We are really dying for the rights of the average Afghan, but we are leading the country to a collapse which will then hurt the average Afghan most. This contradiction needs to be removed.
You know, given the realization of a situation in Afghanistan, how much time do you think will the world take, the regional countries at least, in recognizing Afghanistan?
I don't know, but recognition, remember, is a legal process, right? If you want to go in that, otherwise bilaterally any country can recognize. But the recognition that
not even Pakistan is moving. The Prime Minister said,
but what I'm saying
unless
is,
the regional countries move, we will not move.
Because I think no country wants to be isolated, right? It has to be a coordinated effort. And remember, in the connotation of the Taliban, the recognition is linked to the delisting of the terrorist lists, right? So otherwise, you can't move forward. Countries have legal issues, there could be sanctions, etc. So this has to be coordinated. I think there has to be a understanding and agreement on engagement, and a coordinating mechanism on engagement with the region and rest of the world before you get to recognition. That's how I think it will be sequenced. But let's see, I mean, Pakistan stands with the international community on how we move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Yusuf.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.